It doesn't take a genius to figure out that online card games are booming right now. If you look at the three major trading card games that are physical games, Magic, Pokemon, and Yu-Gi-Oh!, all three of those have online alternatives that the companies that own them have implemented over the past 10 years. Not to mention that while there are new physical card games coming out, we have the Dragon Ball Z game, overall I think that we're noticing more and more online standalone games sort of popping up when back 10, 15 years ago that wouldn't have been the case. Things like Hearthstone are extremely popular, and it's really cool to see all the different versions of card games that you can play both in a physical and an online sense. With many companies devoting a lot of their time and resources into these digital versions of their regular card games, I have to ask myself, are digital card games the future of trading cards as we know it? And I actually think that there are a ton of benefits of both physical and online trading card games. I don't think one is necessarily superior to the other, but lately I've been seeing a lot of people say a lot of these card games to just go completely digital. It's so much easier, and I do understand where they're coming from. Online card games do have many benefits that physical card games simply don't have. Things like the ability, even if it takes some grinding, to play them for free. That's just something you can't get in a trading card game that's in a physical sense. You can't go to your local store and say, okay, if I hang out for like 10 hours, you'll give me some cards for free, right? That's not quite how it works. Where in an online card game, yeah, if you spend a lot of hours playing it in your spare time and you don't want to spend any money, a lot of times you still can make at least a few decks, even if they're not as powerful as the people that are shelling out hundreds of dollars. Also, the convenience factor is huge for a lot of people, and that's actually what got me into Hearthstone in the first place. The ability to play it on my phone or on my computer instead of having to go to a local card shop is a huge deal for players with busy schedules. And while I can recognize all of those benefits, and especially the benefit from the company's perspective when they're making a card game version digitally that they already had physically, now they don't have to spend all the time designing the cards. They just have to put them into a digital online space, which means that they don't have to spend those resources redesigning and coming up with new ideas. They can just take what they already made and put it online. I still think that despite all of those benefits, there are plenty of benefits to physical trading card games that people sometimes forget when they're having this discussion. For example, something that I've always found missing from these online digital card games is the aspect of community. Yes, you can play with other people, you can play against friends, you can play against new opponents, and yes, there are tournaments for those games. I think in general, when you're thinking of digital card games versus physical card games, it's a lot easier and a lot more people actually going to the physical card game tournaments than the online ones. This is especially the case for things that don't have a physical alternative. Things like Hearthstone, yes, you can meet up with people, and actually Hearthstone and Blizzard have encouraged people to do that, but overall it's not nearly as easy as just walking into any random local Magic shop and finding players to play against that actually have their cards with them. But as someone that's played in an in-person Duel Links tournament, I actually think that one of the issues, even once you find people to play against, is that it feels very impersonal. It doesn't feel like I'm playing against someone, it feels like I'm playing against a computer, and the reason is that you sit down, maybe you shake the hand of your opponent, and then both of you just pick up your phones and never look each other in the eye throughout the entire game, or pick up your tablets and never look each other in the eye, and that just feels strange. It feels weirdly impersonal. Like I said, it just doesn't feel like the same feeling I get when I play against someone in a physical card game, just because in a physical card game you have to interact with your opponent, you have to ask them for responses, you have to do those sorts of things, and you don't really get that feeling when you play against someone using an online card game, even if they're right there in front of you. And I'm sure that plenty of people actually have made good friends over playing digital card games. I know I have, just not nearly as many as I have from playing physical card games, so I do want to address that. Yes, I'm sure that it is possible to make friends even when you're playing digitally. That's perfectly normal. I just think it's a little bit more difficult, but one area that I find very difficult to actually argue against is that you have to keep in mind that when you're buying something in a digital card game, you don't really own those cards. Like, you have to realize that if the company goes out of business or if they cancel the service, you don't get to have those cards. They don't send them to you in the mail. They don't give you a refund for all the packs you bought. They're just gone in an instant. We've actually seen this happen. I mean, I'm sure it's happened elsewhere, but I remember in Yu-Gi-Oh! Online, which is a big system that Konami ran for years, eventually they just took it off. They just took it down, and they gave people a pretty big warning. I think it was like a year warning, but still, all those people that spent hundreds, if not thousands of dollars on those cards, suddenly when that site goes off, when that service is shut down, they don't have access to any of those, and that's that's just money down the drain. Now, obviously, they hopefully got their money's worth by playing enough and getting their use out of that, but still, it can be gone in an instant, and that's something that you have to be aware of with every single online card game. If that company, if Blizzard or Konami or anything like that, if they decide to take down that service, yeah, you don't have any of those cards anymore. You're not owed those cards in any way, shape, or form. And while that might not matter for card games that are both digital and physical, something like Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Magic or Pokemon, it's certainly something to keep in mind when you're playing a card game that's only online. Because if a Yu-Gi-Oh! Site, if Duel Links gets shut down tomorrow, I can still go out and buy those cards and I can just play them in a physical sense. But if something like Hearthstone goes off tomorrow, I don't have a way to get those cards. I suppose you could go really out of your way and print them out on paper and try to play against people that way. But overall, when you're thinking of card games that are only online, they're not going to be around forever. And once they go away, there's no way to play that game ever again. As someone that enjoys looking at and collecting older card games that sort of failed back in the day, it's really interesting to think about that even though those card games failed like 10, 15 years ago, I can still find them on eBay. Now, they're not necessarily going to be cheap, but I can still find them. I can still open the product, where with these digital only card games, once they're gone, and that's that. And while those two reasons that I spent most of this video talking about are in fact, in my opinion, the biggest two reasons to play physical card games instead of just putting all your eggs in the digital card game basket, I think that there are some other minor but important reasons to still play physical card games, at least in my opinion. For one, I think that the way that physical card games feel adds a new dimension that you can't really get in online card games. Admittedly, Hearthstone actually does a really, really good job at making it feel like when you're playing online that you're actually playing in real life. They do a lot of different little things to make that game feel really interactive, more so than Duel Links especially. Having to drag and drop the cards on the field, watching your opponent fiddle through their own hand, and you can see which cards they're looking at and hovering over. That's a lot of really cool stuff that Hearthstone does and not a lot of other online card games do, that gives it that added form of like immersion. But overall, when you're playing physical card games, I actually like the idea of holding physical cards. It makes me feel like I'm actually playing something with tangible objects, and you can go out and you can buy sleeves, and you can customize your mat, and you can do all these things that you can't always do in every single online card game. Now, obviously, those online card games will have customizable sleeves in most cases and customizable mats in some cases, but in a lot of cases, it's just not the same of actually buying something in real life and getting to use it in real life, seeing how the material feels, seeing all that stuff, actually holding stuff in your hand. It's something that you can't really replicate with only online card games. And to take that one step further, not just the feel of cards, but what about the looks of cards? Now, different card games are going to do things to sort of promote players getting the highest rarity cards. I think that Duel Links does a pretty bad job of it, honestly. You have the cards that are glossy and just like a little effect. And then you have the cards that are prismatic, which to some people look really cool. Personally, I think they look a little bit gaudy and unprofessional. So really, if I'm looking at Duel Links cards, you can't really tell the difference between as long as they're not glossy or prismatic, you can't tell the difference from a higher rarity card, an expensive card versus an inexpensive card. And some people that might be good, but really there's nowhere on the card that says what rarity it is, which to some people matters a lot. If you think even of Hearthstone, who I feel that they do a better job, obviously on the card itself, and I think Magic does this as well, but on the card itself you can see which rarity it is by if it's like a common card or a blue card or a purple card or an orange card. Those things kind of matter, but also in Hearthstone they do a really cool thing, and they do golden cards that make cards that would just be normally flat, just a flat image, they turn them into animations, and I think that's a fantastic way to, I mean, the Hearthstone high rarity cards look really, really good for an online card game versus the Duel Links cards that just have a little bit of an effect added on top. And I think the reason for me personally that the golden cards are so much more successful than the Duel Links rarities is because you can't do those golden cards, those animated card artworks in real life. I think it's one of the things that Hearthstone really takes advantage of. They know that they're an online card game only, so they can really do things like the golden cards that actually take advantage of that, versus Duel Links where they just slap on a really simple like animation that you really could replicate in real life just by flipping the card back and forth in sunlight. But yeah, there's nothing quite the same as looking at an in real life ultimate rare version of a card or a secret rare version of a card. It's just that glossiness that you can see and how it reflects the light that's so cool and so difficult for an online card game to replicate. replicate. That's why Hearthstone doesn't really try to do that. I mean, yes, the cards are gold, but the main selling point is the animation itself, and that's really cool and something you can't do in real life. But as far as like the other card games that I've played online, a lot of times I just see that little tiny glossy animation or something like prismatic, and that just doesn't look nearly as good as any in real life holographic foiling that you would have on really any card game. Every card game has their own different version of what they want to do for holographic cards, but in my opinion, they all do it more successfully in a physical sense than they do in a digital sense. So hopefully throughout this video you kind of understand what I said at the beginning, where I do think that there are benefits to both physical and online card games. I want them to both exist, I want them to coexist, but I also don't want one to overshadow the other. I think if we only went to online card games, we'd lose a lot of the community that physical card games have sort of brought upon the world, and I think that's really, really cool to make friends, go to tournaments, all those sort of things that you don't get as frequently with online card games. Overall, I want to play both physical and online card games, and hopefully they'll both stick around for a long time. Anyway though, hope you guys enjoyed today's discussion video. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.